You might not have noticed, but Canada has quietly reset its dinner table, and everything coming from America is being removed one item at a time.
Yes, I'm not buying anything American anymore.
So good for EU, good for Mexico, too bad for the US.
No announcements, no protests. Canadians are simply phasing out American food brands from their shopping carts. A soda bottle vanishes from the fridge. A box of cookies is replaced by a local label. A can of Campbell Soup is pushed to the far end of the shelf. And in that silence lies a chilling message. We no longer want the taste of America in our kitchens. They're not angry. They just no longer prioritize American-made food. Today we uncovered the 10 giant American food brands facing the harshest rejection in Canada. Don't assume this doesn't affect you, because when a once-friendly neighbor turns its back, it could make life even harder for everyday people like you. McDonald's. There's a kind of boycott that needs no banners, no movement, just silence and disappearance from the line. People aren't boycotting McDonald's individually, they're quietly urging those around them to do the same.
I'm starting with my family and also forward the whole messages for my colleagues and friends. Please stick to the Canadian product.
That's exactly what's happening to McDonald's in Canada, a market once seen as the friendly backyard of America's biggest fast food empire. Stores that used to be packed are now strangely empty. No more order calls, no more scent of fries filling the aisles, just the glow of red lights reflecting off vacant seats. Canadian consumers aren't openly declaring a boycott of McDonald's, but they're flocking to domestic chains like A&W or Tim Hortons, names they believe understand and respect Canadian taste more. A 2025 survey by Research Commodity showed that nearly 56% of young consumers in Quebec said they were less interested in American fast food brands than they were 5 years ago. McDonald's was mentioned the most. Not because the food got worse, but because of the growing sense that foreign tastes were being imposed while they preferred to support values that felt closer to their community. The fallout started with vanishing orders. A frozen potato plant in Idaho, which used to export over 25% of its goods to Canada, just cut production by 17%. A packaging facility in Wisconsin moved its entire night shift to cold storage operations because orders from the north are no longer steady. Even McDonald's delivery drivers in Buffalo, New York, the main transit hub into Ontario, are now picking up side gigs to make up for lost hours. This retreat didn't start with a corporate decision. It started when millions of Canadians simply stopped ordering. The Golden Arches, once a symbol of the American dream, has become a stark reminder of a chilling truth. Consumer trust isn't permanent, and once that trust is lost, no matter how big the brand, it won't hold its place. McDonald's still exists in Canada, but its presence is fading, and the truly alarming part, other brands, even those more deeply woven into Canada's dining culture, are now facing the same cold shoulder. Kraft Heinz. There was once a small town in Ontario that called Heinz the pride of our community. Leamington, a peaceful place filled with the scent of ripe tomatoes every summer, used to be home to Heinz's largest ketchup factory in Canada. For nearly a century, the people here made a living from those deep red bottles bearing an American label, and Heinz thrived on their unwavering loyalty. Until one day, Heinz decided to walk away. In 2014, they shut down the Leamington plant, leaving hundreds of workers unemployed and a community feeling betrayed. Even when they later returned and slapped a new Made in Canada label on their packaging, the people never forgot Heinz had once put profit above loyalty. That scar never healed, and now in 2025, it's spreading across Canada. Major grocery chains like Sobeys and Metro are shrinking shelf space for Kraft Heinz products. Domestic brands like French's, once far less popular, are now enjoying double-digit sales growth, driven by their message of supporting Canadian values. But the story doesn't end there. A bottle cap plant in Pennsylvania dedicated to exporting Heinz sauces just shut down its night shift operations. A logistics firm in Ohio announced the layoff of 23 workers after losing its Ontario shipping contracts. And in Leamington itself, workers who once hoped Heinz would fully revive its factory are now training for new careers. This isn't a loud boycott. It's a quiet turn of the back by consumers who once loved this brand like a part of their childhood, like a staple on the family dinner table. To Canadians, Heinz isn't just ketchup. It's a question: if they abandoned us once, why should we give them our trust again? And that very question has led millions to quietly remove Heinz from their carts, turning instead to a brand they believe deserves their loyalty more. But if even a once-beloved condiment can be cast aside so easily, what will happen to a name even more iconic, one long seen as the soul of every fridge, every dinner table? Coca-Cola. For nearly a century, Coca-Cola wasn't just a drink, it was a symbol. a symbol of connection, of lively summers, of joyful moments around the dinner table. But in Canada in 2025, that symbol is fading, can by can. No public boycott needed, just restaurant chains like The Keg and Boston Pizza quietly switching to local beverage suppliers. Just supermarkets like Real Canadian Superstore relegating Coca-Cola to the bottom shelves, giving the spotlight to sodas proudly labeled proudly made in Canada. The blow didn't come from quality, it came from emotion. A 2024 Angus Reid survey found that over 60% of Canadian consumers said they were less likely to buy American brands if a comparable local option exists. And Coca-Cola, as perhaps the most globally recognizable American brand, naturally became the first target. In Atlanta, where Coca-Cola is headquartered, suppliers reported a 14% drop in shipments to Canada in the first 2 quarters of the year. A can label printing plant in Alabama had to lay off 1/3 of its contract workers. A packaging company in Georgia specializing in Coca-Cola export cartons for North America just canceled a multi-million-dollar order. But the real concern isn't in the numbers, it's in the erosion of trust. Canadian consumers aren't rejecting Coca-Cola out of hatred. They simply feel there's no reason left to stay loyal. They're choosing other drinks not because they taste better, but because they feel more respected. For Americans, a can of Coke might be nostalgia tradition, but for many Canadians now, it's a reminder they were once treated like automatic customers expected to buy anything with an American label, and now they want to prove otherwise. Each untouched Coke and left on the shelf is a signal that even the strongest, most familiar brand, if it fails to adapt and nurture trust, can crack, slowly but irreversibly. And if a national icon can be questioned, then those lesser-known, less emotionally anchored names are likely the next to face the cold shoulder. PepsiCo. There's a truth few Americans want to face. PepsiCo is no longer a familiar face at the dinner tables of millions of Canadian families. No outrage, no loud declarations. Canadians have simply stopped reaching for it. Once a symbol of youth creativity and approachability, Pepsi dominated Canada's soft drink market throughout the 2000s. But by 2025, what they're met with is indifference. Not hatred, but no love either. Part of the reason lies in the feeling of a one-way relationship as Canadian consumers increasingly sense that they're treated as a market, not a partner. PepsiCo pouring most of its innovation and marketing investment into the US, while slashing its Canadian ad budget made people here feel overlooked, a frustrating experience for a proud developed market like Canada. You don't need complex surveys to see it. Just look at store shelves in Calgary or Winnipeg. Instead of Pepsi, people are reaching for drinks from Canada Dry President's Choice, or even new local brands simply because they sound more friendly. According to CTV News, by the end of 2024, PepsiCo's soft drink market share in Canada had dropped nearly 9%, and judging by how this year's going, that number has likely plunged even further. A bottling plant in Ontario that had worked with PepsiCo for nearly 20 years just announced it would not renew its contract. A plastic bottle manufacturer in Michigan, once focused on supplying Canada, has now shifted to other partners, citing a significant decline in Canadian orders. Even PepsiCo's snack line, its second major profit pillar after beverages, hasn't escaped the chill. Doritos, Lay's Cheetos, Try to Eat are now locked in fierce competition with local brands like Hard Bite and Neil Brothers, names increasingly favored by Canadian youth for their locally made, community-first messaging. PepsiCo hasn't pulled out of Canada. But Canada is slowly pulling away from PepsiCo, one consumer at a time, one snack break at a time. And if a corporation with a vast product ecosystem present in every corner store, every stadium can't maintain its foothold, then brands that live off childhood nostalgia in Canada may be facing an even harsher reckoning ahead. Mondelez. Some foods are tied to childhood memories, but that doesn't guarantee they'll be forgiven forever. Oreo chips, Ahoy Ritz. Once the sweet staples of afternoon snacks in millions of Canadian households are now quietly falling off shopping lists. Not because the taste has changed, but because of a deeper feeling: betrayal. In 2016, Mondelez shut down its Oreo production plant in Toronto, relocating operations to Mexico. Although the move was wrapped in corporate language about restructuring for the hundreds of laid-off workers and Canadian consumers, the message was clear: profit mattered more than community. By 2025, that shadow from the past still lingers. On consumer forums, calls to stop buying Oreo, support local products are showing up more frequently. Some convenience stores in Quebec and British Columbia have even started reducing Mondelez snack inventory to make room for Canadian brands like Leclerc or Made Good. The result, a packaging facility in Ohio, once dedicated to producing boxes for Mondelez cookies exported to Canada, has suspended its night shift due to a sudden drop in orders. A flour processing plant in Illinois, which handled international grade mixes for Mondelez, has had to cut nearly 40% of its seasonal labor contracts. Worse yet, many longtime Canadian retail partners are now questioning Mondelez's sense of community engagement. One local supermarket chain in Alberta recently stated they would prioritize any brand still producing within Canadian territory, no matter how big or small. Mondelez's story isn't just about a cookie. It's about memories eroded about trust that was once taken for granted, now subject to scrutiny. For Canadian consumers, turning away from Oreo isn't just about changing tastes. It's an act, a way of saying we remember who chose to leave and we're not so quick to forget. And if a brand built on decades of emotional loyalty can be treated this coldly, then those relying merely on morning consumption habits might want to start worrying. General Mills. When a breakfast becomes an icon of America, it inadvertently carries the weight of the entire nation. And in the eyes of many Canadian consumers today, the name General Mills is no longer a morning companion, but rather a reminder of dependence and a lack of choice right in their own pantry. General Mills, with brands like Cheerios, Lucky Charms, and Nature Valley, once held an untouchable position on Canada's cereal shelves for decades. But now those colorful boxes are gradually being replaced not by noise, but by the quiet spread of changing consumer habits. According to a 2024 Nielsen report, General Mills' sales in the Canadian market dropped by more than 12%, a figure big enough to alarm the entire supply chain. A packaging plant in Minneapolis recently had to pause its label printing contract due to rising inventory. In Montreal, a local food distribution network announced it would stop ordering General Mills products after more than 15 years of partnership, choosing instead to prioritize domestic cereals like Nature's Path and Love Crunch. The reason isn't price. Canadians are willing to pay a few extra dollars for a box of cereal, but they don't want that money to continue supporting a corporation they feel hasn't spoken their language for far too long. General Mills has repeatedly faced criticism from consumers for a lack of innovation and insufficient investment in products that meet Canada's evolving tastes, especially for vegetarian, gluten-free, or organic options. Instead of listening, they keep offering familiar products with a classic American family message, but in today's context, that image no longer feels friendly, and sometimes even creates a sense of distance. One telling fact, General Mills has never pulled out of Canada. But the market share is quietly pulling away from them one box at a time. If a company once regarded as the morning gatekeeper can no longer hold the trust of its customers, then businesses dealing in even more essential goods, those living on trust and familiarity, might be on a slippery slope without even realizing how far they've slid. Tyson Foods. Imagine this: a piece of fried chicken, once an icon of convenient American meals, now becoming a detail crossed off the menus of countless Canadian families. Tyson Foods is more than just a food supplier. They used to be the heart of the American meat processing industry, but that very overconfidence is now costing them dearly. In 2025, in major Canadian supermarkets like Loblaws and Sobeys, the presence of Tyson-branded products is steadily shrinking. A survey conducted by Angus Reid found that over 43% of Canadian consumers are intentionally avoiding frozen meat products originating from the US, with Tyson being the first name called out. No protests, no hashtags. Just a quiet choice to pick other brands during each grocery trip. Why? Partly because Tyson abruptly closed 3 plants in the U.S. Emporia North Little Rock and Philadelphia, resulting in over 1,000 workers losing their jobs. The question consumers ask is, if they can so easily pull out of their own country, why should we trust them? Worse, Tyson was embroiled in scandals involving poor working conditions during the pandemic and environmental pollution at several production facilities, issues that deeply disappoint Canadians who prioritize ethics and food safety. Some food retail chains in Ontario and Quebec have proactively reduced orders or replaced Tyson products with domestic brands like Maple Leaf or Greenfield. The impact doesn't stop there. A plastic packaging supplier in Indiana reported an unexpected loss of over 40% of Q1 orders due to reduced purchases from the Canadian market. A refrigerated transport company in Buffalo, New York, once specializing in shipping Tyson meat to the Toronto area, cut its fleet by 1/3 due to lack of cargo. The problem here isn't product quality, it's about how a brand treats trust. Canada doesn't hate chicken. They just don't want their meals associated with a symbol that has lost its ability to build commitment. And if even dinner, the place where familiarity often outweighs reason, can be changed like this, then for canned foods, which always carry questions about their ingredients, the consequences could be even harsher. Hormel Foods. Some brands don't need advertising to sell well until consumers feel betrayed. Hormel Foods used to be on that list. A can of Spam, a jar of Skippy peanut butter so familiar they were present in every kitchen across North America. But in Canada now, they're viewed with caution. Supermarket chains like Metro and Loblaws are quietly shrinking the shelf space dedicated to Hormel products. No bans, no loud announcements, just gradually pushed to the sidelines like an outdated item. Canadians don't say it aloud, but they remember clearly during the supply chain crises and food shortages after the pandemic, Hormel chose to export large quantities to markets prioritized for profit, leaving loyal consumers with empty shelves. This is no longer just business, it's a crack in trust. When trust is lost, all marketing campaigns become meaningless. An internal survey from Food Retail Insights revealed that over 50% of Canadian consumers under 45 no longer see Hormel as a reliable brand. In their minds, Hormel has become a symbol of a past replaced, and that replacement is more than just switching to another brand. It means a series of order cuts at label printing plants in Iowa, packaging lines in Minnesota, forced to cut 3 shifts a week due to insufficient production for the Canadian market. A logistics company in Michigan that once shipped over 8 tons of Spam daily now can't even fill a single refrigerated container. The problem isn't the product, it's the feeling of abandonment. A food brand to survive in the hearts of consumers needs more than flavor, it needs connection. And when that connection is severed, no matter how gently, the consequences hit the wallets of thousands of Americans who rely on that supply chain. If a can of processed meat linked to meals for generations can no longer hold loyalty, then what chance does a warm can of soup in the cold winter have to survive? Campbell Soup Company. Not every collapse begins with a loud crack. With Hormel Foods, everything happened quietly, but the consequences are seismic. In Canada, consumers turning away from Hormel didn't come from a media shock or a loud protest campaign. It started with something very small, they simply ignored it. Spam cans, once symbols of quick meals, now sit quietly in the corner of shelves, replaced by local brands lesser known, but more favored. At Sobeys, sales of Hormel products dropped 17% in just the first 3 months of 2025, and the trend shows no sign of stopping. That coldness isn't about taste, it's about memories. Canadians have not forgotten the supply chain crises of 2023-2024, when Hormel prioritized exports to high-profit markets, leaving empty shelves behind in Canadian supermarkets. They don't see us as a main market, commented one consumer in Alberta, and that statement marked the end of loyalty. Hormel hasn't announced a withdrawal from Canada, but they no longer appear in major promotions. No more ads on national TV. No sponsorships of local food events. This is not a strategy, it's a sign of retreat. That retreat is reaching the factories. A packaging facility in Ohio, once handling over 60% of orders for the Canadian market, just announced 48 staff layoffs. A cold storage distributor in Buffalo, New York, had to reroute shipments as northern clients no longer order regularly. Links in the supply chain from truck drivers to warehouse workers are now facing what no one expected: an American food brand being rejected by its most loyal consumers. No one would have guessed that a can of processed meat, once a lifesaver through wars, disasters, and pandemics, would be viewed today with such suspicion. But the world has changed. And when trust is no longer the main ingredient in every product, even a spoonful of doubt is enough to make the entire meal refused. And if a brand once tied to survival memories can be rejected, like this can another warm dish, thought to be indispensable every winter, escape the cold wind blowing from across the border. Nestlé USA. Some names inspire trust with just a glance. But in Canada right now, Nestlé USA no longer makes that list. From Häagen-Dazs ice cream, Nescafé coffee, to Stauffer's frozen meals, Nestlé once permeated every corner of Canadian culinary life. But things have started to change, not through official announcements, but through consumer behavior people are turning away. Supermarket chains like No Frills and Fortino's are sharply reducing the frequency of stocking Nestlé USA products. A retailer in Toronto shared that American ice cream inventory is 34% higher than the same period last year, simply because consumers no longer see the brand as representing what they want to support. Nestlé was once very good at selling emotions: a cup of coffee, bringing a sense of connection, a Kit Kat bar as a small reward after a long day. But now those very emotions are turning against them. Canadian consumers have not forgotten that Nestlé was investigated in the US for labor and environmental issues. And in a market increasingly prioritizing ethical consumption, that stain is not easily erased. Although Nestlé has tried to reposition the brand with vegan, organic, and sustainable products, the label "Made in USA," once a seal of quality, has become a signal for caution. As orders from Canada decline, the pain spreads to factories in Illinois and California, where most frozen export products are packaged. A logistics company in Ohio specializing in shipping Nestlé condensed milk to Ontario lost 2 regular routes in the first quarter of 2025. and dozens of seasonal workers at a candy factory in Wisconsin had to be laid off earlier than usual due to quarterly shipment targets not being met. No official statements have come from Nestlé USA headquarters, but everyone understands when shelves fall silent, backstage chaos ensues. Emotion is the invisible asset of every food brand. But once consumers feel betrayed, even the sweetest candy can become a symbol of a bitter memory. And if even chocolate bars once linked to Valentine's Day summer ice creams no longer hold their place in the hearts of Canadians, then a meal thought indispensable in winter is also standing on the brink of being forgotten. You might have thought boycotts only come from noisy public outcries from loud protest campaigns, but sometimes a country quietly turning its back is enough to shake the massive supply chain of the United States. When Canada, once a close neighbor, starts rejecting foods that have been part of their families for decades, the question is no longer, do they like American products, but how many Americans will lose their jobs? How many factories will shut down just because we are no longer the preferred choice? This video does not promote division between nations or stir up hatred. All content is presented with the purpose of exploring, analyzing, and encouraging discussion based on real events and trends. We respect the values of the U.S. Constitution and federal regulations. If you find this video helpful, please leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss upcoming analyses where we reveal stories that mainstream media often keep silent about. And leave a comment, is the American brand gradually losing the weight it once carried?